So we both read this blog post, The Gift of Hospice,
Mhm.
Supporting Peaceful Endings, and I think it's a great jumping off point for a deep dive. Serious illness brings up so many challenges, and honestly, I think hospice is something we all need to understand better.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that deserves more attention. And what really struck me about this post is how it reframes our perception of hospice. Like, you might think choosing hospice means you're giving up, but it's actually about choosing a different kind of fight. It's about prioritizing quality of life over quantity.
Right. It's not about giving up, it's about shifting the focus. And the post really emphasizes that hospice is about so much more than just medical care. It's about providing holistic support for the patient and their family, addressing their physical, emotional, social, and even spiritual needs.
It's about recognizing that end of life care isn't just about the physical body. It's about acknowledging the whole person and your support system. And that's where this interdisciplinary approach with doctors, nurses, counselors, chaplains, volunteers really comes in. They all work together to provide that comprehensive care.
And that family-centered care aspect is so important. When someone you love is seriously ill, you're not just dealing with their medical needs. You're their emotional support, their advocate, their everything.
You're right. And the post highlights how hospice helps families navigate all of that. It's not just about the patient, it's about easing the burden on the whole family during an incredibly difficult time.
They offer respite care, so family members can take a break, help with practical tasks like bathing and dressing, and even bereavement support after the patient has passed.
And I think it's also important to mention the financial aspects. Hospice can often help families navigate those tricky insurance issues and end-of-life costs, which is a huge burden lifted.
For sure, that's a huge part of it. And the blog post gets into some specifics about the services offered, which I think would be really helpful for anyone considering hospice care.
Yeah, the range of services is pretty extensive, which speaks to their commitment to comprehensive care. It's about addressing the whole person, not just the illness.
All right, so first and foremost, expert symptom management. The post stresses that a cornerstone of hospice care is making sure the patient is as comfortable as possible. And this can include medication, but it also mentions complementary therapies like massage or aromatherapy.
What's interesting is the focus on individualized care. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. The team works with the patient to figure out what works best for them in terms of managing their symptoms. So it's not just about pain pills. Hospice uses techniques like aromatherapy to ease anxiety or music therapy to help with emotional distress. It's all tailored to your needs.
And it goes beyond just the physical, too. The post also talks about emotional and spiritual support. They have counselors and chaplains available to help patients and their families process their feelings and find meaning in their experiences.
Which is crucial because facing a terminal illness can bring up a lot of existential questions and emotional distress. So having trained professionals to help navigate those feelings can be incredibly valuable.
And then there's respite care, which we touched on earlier. This is where hospice provides temporary relief for caregivers so they can rest and recharge.
And this is such an important point because how can caregivers effectively provide care if they're exhausted and burnt out? So respite care isn't just a few hours off. It can range from trained volunteers providing companionship at home to short-term stays in facilities, giving you a chance to recharge.
Yeah, it allows them to prioritize their own well-being, which ultimately benefits the patient as well. And then there's the practical assistance, help with daily tasks like bathing, dressing, medication management, even light housekeeping. These may seem like small things, but they can make a huge difference in the quality of life for both the patient and their caregivers.
Absolutely. As the illness progresses, those tasks become increasingly challenging. And having someone to help can significantly reduce the burden on family members. It allows them to focus on connecting with their loved one instead of being overwhelmed with daily tasks.
Exactly. And finally, the post talks about bereavement support. This is something that really sets hospice apart. They continue to support families even after the patient has passed away.
That's right. It's a critical part of the healing process for families. Grief can be overwhelming, and having a support system in place during that time is essential. Hospice recognizes that their role extends beyond the patient's lifetime.
Okay, so we've talked about the philosophy and the services, but where does all this take place? The post mentions both home-based hospice and residential facilities.
And that's the beauty of it. Hospice care is tailored to the individual's needs and preferences. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So if someone wants to remain in their home surrounded by familiar things, hospice can make that happen.
And if they need more intensive care, there are residential facilities specifically designed to provide that level of support. It's about finding the best fit for the patient's individual situation.
Exactly. Imagine your ideal setting for end-of-life care. Hospice can bring expert support to your own home, or you can choose a facility designed for specialized care. It's all about your preferences.
The post also addresses a common misconception that hospice is only for the final days of life.
Which is so important to clarify. Hospice can be beneficial for individuals with a life expectancy of 6 months or less, and starting earlier allows them to fully benefit from its comprehensive services.
And I think that's where the gift in the title of the post really comes in. It's about giving people the time and support they need to live their remaining days to the fullest, whatever that looks like for them.
Right. It's about shifting the focus from quantity of life to quality of life. Hospice helps create space for living well even as illness progresses.
The post lists a whole range of life-limiting illnesses, from cancer and heart disease to lung disease and dementia, for which hospice can be appropriate.
And it's not limited to one specific diagnosis or demographic. It's a service that can benefit anyone facing a terminal illness, regardless of their age or background.
The key is having that conversation with your healthcare provider. They can help you determine if and when hospice might be the right choice for you or a loved one.
And that leads us to another important point, making the decision to choose hospice. It's a significant decision that should involve open and honest communication between the patient, their family, and their healthcare provider.
And the post touches on the difference between hospice and palliative care, which can sometimes be confusing.
Yeah, while both focus on improving quality of life, hospice is specifically for those with a terminal illness and a limited life expectancy, while palliative care can be provided at any stage of a serious illness.
Advanced care planning is a huge part of this conversation, too. It's so important to have those discussions early on about your wishes for medical treatment and end-of-life decisions, so that your loved ones and healthcare providers know what's important to you.
You bring up a great point. These conversations are crucial for ensuring that your wishes are known and respected. It's about maintaining autonomy and dignity, even in the face of a serious illness.
This whole discussion makes me think about my uncle. He was in hospice care before he passed away, and it made such a difference for him and our entire family.
It sounds like you have a personal connection to this topic. I'd be interested to hear more about your experience.
Well, my uncle had been battling cancer for a long time. And towards the end, it became clear that curative treatments weren't working anymore. It was a really difficult time for everyone. And we were all struggling to come to terms with what was happening.
I can only imagine how challenging that must have been. Facing a terminal illness is never easy, and those conversations can be incredibly difficult to have.
It was. But once we decided to move him to hospice care, things started to shift. The hospice team was incredible. They helped manage his pain and other symptoms so effectively that he was able to enjoy his final weeks.
That speaks to the power of hospice care. It's not about giving up, it's about making the most of the time that remains.
And for my family, it was such a relief to know that he was in good hands. The hospice nurses were so compassionate and attentive, not just to him, but to all of us.
Yeah.
They answered our questions, provided emotional support, and just made the whole process easier to bear.
It sounds like the hospice team really provided that holistic care we were discussing earlier, not just for your uncle, but for your entire family.
They did. They even helped us with practical things like arranging for a hospital bed and other equipment at home. It took so much stress off of us so we could focus on spending quality time with him.
That's a perfect example of how hospice goes above and beyond to support families. It's about easing the burden in any way they can.
And then after he passed, they continued to check in with us, offering grief counseling and support groups. It was like they knew exactly what we needed even before we did.
It sounds like the bereavement support was invaluable for your family during that difficult time. It's a reminder that hospice care doesn't end when the patient passes away. The support continues for the family as they navigate their grief.
It really did. Honestly, I don't know what we would have done without hospice. They helped my uncle die with dignity and peace. And they helped our family through one of the toughest times we've ever faced.
Hearing your story really brings home the human side of hospice. It's easy to get caught up in the logistics, but those personal touches, those moments of connection are what truly matter.
It's so important to share these stories because there's still so much stigma around hospice.
There's this misconception that choosing hospice means giving up hope. But your story beautifully illustrates how it's actually about embracing a different kind of hope, the hope for a peaceful and dignified end of life.
And that's something we should all be able to talk about more openly and honestly.
Death is a natural part of life, and having access to compassionate and supportive care at the end of life should be a right, not a privilege.
If you're facing a serious illness or if someone you love is also, I encourage you to learn more about hospice care and have that conversation with your healthcare provider. You might be surprised at the peace of mind it can bring.
Knowledge is power, and understanding your options empowers you to make the best choices for yourself and your loved ones.
The post makes one more really important point that I want to touch on before we move on to the next section of our discussion.
What stood out to you?
It's this idea that hospice isn't about prolonging life or postponing death. It's about living fully in the time that remains,
Hmm. Yeah, that really captures the essence of hospice. It's not about denying death, but embracing life even in the face of a terminal illness.
making each day count, focusing on what brings joy and meaning, cherishing the moments we have with loved ones.
It's a reminder that quality of life is just as important as quantity of life, maybe even more so.
As we've been discussing the benefits of hospice, I think it's clear that this type of care emphasizes a shift in perspective.
Definitely. It's about moving away from fighting death and focusing on living well in the time that remains.
Embracing a different kind of hope. The hope for peace, comfort, and dignity in the final stages of life.
Powerful stuff, especially in a society that often prioritizes prolonging life at all costs.
We live in a culture that sometimes struggles to accept death as a natural part of life, and hospice challenges that. It encourages us to reframe our thinking.
What I find interesting is this emphasis on patient-centered care in the blog post, honoring the individual's wishes and preferences every step of the way.
That's a fundamental principle of hospice care. The patient's voice is central to all decision-making, empowering them to maintain control over their care and their environment.
It's not about some set protocol or a one-size-fits-all approach.
It's about creating a personalized care plan that aligns with patients' goals, values, and individual needs.
And that includes involving the family in the decision-making process.
Oh, definitely. Hospice recognizes the importance of family involvement, and they encourage open communication between the patient, their loved ones, and the care team.
Which brings us back to the idea of holistic care. It's not just about addressing physical symptoms. It's about attending to the emotional, social, and spiritual needs of both the patient and their family.
End-of-life care is multifaceted. It requires a comprehensive approach.
And that's where the interdisciplinary team comes in. Doctors, nurses, social workers, counselors, chaplains, they all work together to provide that wraparound support.
Each team member brings their unique expertise to the table.
And that collaboration extends beyond the hospice team. They work closely with the patient's primary care physician and other healthcare providers to ensure continuity of care.
So it's creating a seamless network of support tailored to the individual's needs.
Right.
And one of the key aspects of that support is symptom management.
Of course.
The hospice team is highly skilled in controlling pain, nausea, shortness of breath anxiety, and other distressing symptoms.
They use a combination of medication complementary therapies and other interventions to keep the patient as comfortable as possible.
And as we said, that care is individualized. What works for one person may not work for another. So the hospice team takes the time to listen to the patient and develop a personalized plan that addresses their specific needs.
And we can't forget about the emotional and spiritual support.
That's a crucial aspect of end-of-life care that's often overlooked. Facing a terminal illness can bring up a lot of difficult emotions, and just having a supportive presence can make a world of difference.
Hospice counselors and chaplains are trained to help patients and their families process those feelings, explore their spiritual beliefs, and find meaning in their experiences.
Providing a safe and compassionate space for individuals to grapple with the big questions that arise at the end of life.
And that support extends to the family as well.
Hospice recognizes that caregivers need care too. They offer respite care counseling and support groups to help families cope with the challenges of caring for a loved one with a terminal illness.
It's about acknowledging the emotional toll that caregiving can take and providing resources to help families navigate that journey.
And that support doesn't end when the patient passes away. Hospice offers bereavement services for up to a year after the death of a loved one.
It's a testament to their commitment to providing comprehensive care, not just for the patient, but for the entire family.
They understand that grief is a process, and they're there to support families every step of the way.
As we've been talking about all the benefits of hospice, I keep thinking back to your uncle.
His experience with hospice really had a profound impact on me and my family. It made me realize how important it is to share these stories and break down the misconceptions surrounding hospice care.
Personal stories can be so powerful. They humanize a topic that's often shrouded in fear and uncertainty.
I remember when we first started talking about hospice for my uncle, there was a lot of hesitation. Some family members felt like it meant giving up, like we were abandoning him.
That's a common misconception. People often associate hospice with the very end of life, with giving up on treatment and accepting death.
But that's not what hospice is about at all. It's about shifting the focus from curative treatment to comfort care and providing support and dignity in the final stages of life.
Recognizing that there's more to life than just prolonging it. It's about living well even when time is limited.
And hospice allowed my uncle to do just that. The hospice team managed his pain so effectively that he was able to enjoy his final weeks. He was able to spend time with his family, share stories, and find peace.
It sounds like hospice gave him the gift of a good death.
It did.
Mm.
And it gave our family the gift of peace of mind, knowing that he was receiving the best possible care and that we were supported every step of the way.
A powerful testament to the transformative power of hospice care.
And it's a reminder that we need to have these conversations about end-of-life care earlier, before a crisis hits.
Advanced care planning is so crucial. It allows individuals to express their wishes for medical treatment and end-of-life decisions, ensuring that their values and preferences are honored.
And it can alleviate so much stress and uncertainty for families during such a difficult time.
One thing that often comes up in these conversations is the difference between hospice and palliative care.
It can be confusing. Both focus on improving quality of life for people with serious illnesses, but there's some key distinctions.
So hospice is specifically for individuals with a terminal illness and a life expectancy of 6 months or less, while palliative care can be provided at any stage of a serious illness.
So palliative care can be a part of hospice care,
Okay.
but it can also be offered independently.
That's right. And palliative care can be offered alongside curative treatment, while hospice is typically provided when curative treatment is no longer desired or effective.
So it's important to understand the nuances of these different types of care and to have those conversations with your healthcare provider to determine the best option for your individual situation.
And remember, these conversations aren't just for people who are nearing the end of life. It's never too early to start thinking about advanced care planning and expressing your wishes for medical treatment.
It's about taking control of your healthcare journey and ensuring that your values and preferences are respected.
As we've been discussing hospice care, one thing that's become clear is that it's not just about dying. It's about living well until the very end.
It's about embracing a different kind of hope. The hope for peace, comfort, and dignity in the final chapter of life.
And recognizing that death is a natural part of the human experience, something that we should all be able to talk about openly and honestly.
Death is a part of life, and hospice helps us navigate that transition with grace and compassion.
And it provides support not just for the patient, but for their loved ones as well.
It's a reminder that we don't have to face these challenges alone. There are resources available to help us through those difficult times.
And those resources can make all the difference in the world, providing comfort, peace of mind, and a sense of support when we need it most.
As we've been talking about this, I've been thinking about how much the blog post emphasized the importance of choice.
It's about empowering individuals to make informed decisions about their end-of-life care.
It's about respecting their wishes and preferences and creating a care plan that aligns with their values and goals.
And recognizing that everyone's journey is unique. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to end-of-life care.
So it's important to have those conversations, to do your research, and to advocate for yourself or your loved one.
And to remember that there's no shame in seeking support. Hospice is a resource, a gift, and it's available to anyone who needs it.
This conversation has really helped me solidify my understanding of hospice care.
Me too. It's been a valuable exploration of a topic that's often misunderstood. Knowledge is power, and understanding our options empowers us to make informed decisions about end-of-life care.
And those decisions can make a world of difference, not just for the patient, but for their loved ones as well.
I'm struck by the compassion and empathy that permeates the hospice philosophy.
It's about recognizing the inherent dignity of every human being, regardless of their age, their illness, or their circumstances.
It's about providing care that's not just clinically effective, but also deeply human.
And supporting families through one of the most challenging experiences they'll ever face.
It's a beautiful and important mission, and I'm grateful for the work that hospice organizations do.
I'm hopeful that as we continue to have these conversations, the stigma surrounding hospice will diminish, and more people will be able to access the compassionate care they deserve.
I share that hope. And to recognize the invaluable role that hospice plays in supporting individuals and families through those transitions.
This deep dive has been a powerful reminder of the importance of hospice care and the invaluable role it plays in our society,
I hope our listeners found this conversation insightful and thought-provoking.
and that it encourages them to learn more about hospice care and to have those important conversations about end-of-life planning with their loved ones.
Because at the end of the day, it's about ensuring that we live our lives to the fullest right up until the very end.
And that we have the support and compassion we need to navigate those final moments with grace and dignity.